The First Noble Truth of Buddhism states that life is suffering. Of course, this doesn't mean that every second of every day is torture, but it does mean that suffering is a natural and some might say inescapable part of life. That said, many of the problems we endure is because we do not understand the simple fact that suffering comes in two forms. There is foolish suffering, which is suffering caused by our own actions. It's completely within our control. And then there is normal suffering, which comes as a result of things outside of our control. We struggle because we focus very much on the suffering that we cannot change, and we do very little about the suffering we can change. Case in point, an example of foolish suffering would be us knowing that if we go to bed right now, we will have a great night's sleep, we'll wake up in the morning and be bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and ready to conquer the day. But what do we do instead? Well, we grab the remote to see what's on TV. This suffering is foolish, not because we ourselves are foolish per se, but because we're doing a foolish thing. We are creating the causes of suffering when they could be easily avoided. On the flip side, normal suffering comes as the result of things that are outside of our control. We are preparing for a barbecue, and on the day of the event, it pours down rain, and we think our day is ruined. Now, this is normal suffering because it has a cause and effect, like all suffering, but it's normal because it's not in our control. We cannot control the weather. It's not happening because of anything we personally did. It's just raining because it does that sometimes. Now, the reason we suffer is because we take the rain falling on the day of our event very personally. We get very worked up about that, and we completely ignore the fact that if we just go to bed at a decent hour, we wouldn't be tired the next day. What if we flipped that paradigm? What if suffering that came as a result of the actions of others, we learn to accept it? Doesn't mean we don't do anything about it, but instead of taking it personally, we just try to take actions to minimize that suffering instead. So if it rains on the day of our event, we just have the party inside, keep it moving. If someone cuts us off in traffic, they're an unsafe driver, instead of yelling at them and honking on our horn, we just switch lanes to get away from them and turn on our favorite radio station. By accepting that this suffering is normal, that it's outside of our control, we can take actions to minimize its effects. On the flip side, if we look at the suffering we're experiencing and we understand it's foolish, I'm tired because I didn't go to bed the night before, well, what if instead we choose to go to bed earlier that day? What if we're suffering because we had an argument with our partner because we said something unkind, and it's foolish because we're the people who chose the words that would come out of our mouths, and instead of ignoring that suffering or pretending it didn't happen, instead we choose to apologize for unkind words and choose our words more carefully next time. By understanding that foolish suffering is within our control and choosing new, better actions in the future, we can eliminate that suffering completely from our lives. When we take the time to look at our problems and differentiate between foolish suffering and normal suffering, we can figure out the exact right thing to do in that situation, making life better for ourselves and others. Amitabha.